Yay, it's Friday, TGIF, right? Okay, so what I'm going to be demoing tonight is how to use IQ Designer and create an applique file to stitch out in the embroidery side of the machine. Okay, so first, when you power up your machine, you should have a screen similar to this. This is your home screen. So you can also, if you're in the sewing screens, you can also touch the little home button right up here, tap that, and it'll take you right back to the home screen. So we're going to go into IQ. And a really great feature with IQ is, as far as talking about appliques, is this. So this little icon right here, it's got the circle and the square. That is the stamp and pattern icon. Here we go. Let me just get my pointer. There we go. This will be easier, hopefully. So yes, the circle and the square is the stamp pattern icon. When you touch that, the first screen you see has 30 shapes on it. Any of those can be used for applique, to make an applique with. Okay? That's this first icon right up here at the top. Okay? The second one are another 30 designs, which you could use for applique as well. And the third one is an open design, which is really, this one could be used for applique, this one could, so you get the idea, but these are for more something to apply decorative stitches to, or just to do a bunch of outlines or create your own quilting design, so forth and so on. So we're going to focus on this menu right here. Now let's see, what holiday is coming up here really soon? Mother's Day is coming up, right? So let's go over here to the second icon, and there's some cool flower designs right here. So let's say I wanted to do this one, this 5-petaled flower design. So I would just tap it and click on OK. And now I have this design up on my screen. Let me move my keyboard out of the way here. There we go. Excuse me. So now here's my opportunity to get it to the size that I actually want it to be. So if I click on the size icon, I can now resize that shape. The top two, this side makes it smaller. This side will make it larger. You can make it increase or decrease the size evenly from all 4 directions with the top 2 icons right here. The middle 2, the arrows are very indicative. You can shrink it vertically or enlarge it vertically, or you can shrink it horizontally or enlarge it horizontally. Okay? So if I wanted to make the whole thing smaller, I could just tap on this, and we can see it going down. The numbers right here represent the finished size of the design. Right now it says 5.22 by 5.22. Let's see how small we can go with it. We just pass 3 by 3. You can actually make it pretty small, all the way down to 0.39 by 0.39. Now, if I was creating an embroidery design out of this shape, that would be okay, but I'm certainly not going to try to trim an applique of that size either. So, if we touch this, that brings it back up to its original size. This is kind of like a reset button, for lack of a better word. The dials down here will actually move the design around diagonally, down, up. If you touch the little center dot, that centers it in the hoop on the screen. So let's just bring this down, say to, let's get it close down to like 6 inches for lack of a better, that's what we're just going to do for giggles. So I'm just going to get it so it says 6 by 6, 5.98, 5.99, and there is 6 inches by 6 inches. Okay. So next, I'm going to click on OK. And then what I can do, so this is going to be the first step of an applique. I've already got a piece of fabric, let's say I've already got a piece of fabric picked out. Now since it's 6 by 6 inches, it would not fit in the 5 by 7. So I'd have to go up to my next tube size. And for me on the Altair, that is a 9.5 by 9.5. I could always shrink this down and make it so it's under 5, a hair under 5, or right at 5. Let's make it right at 5. So now it's 5 by 5 inches. Now that would totally fit in the 5 by 7 by 5 by 7 hoop. If I wanted to use my smallest hoop that came with the Altair, which would be the 4 by 4 inch hoop, I could just size it down so it said 4 by 4 right there. But I'm going to leave it at the 5 by 5 and click on OK. So to create an applique, there are 3 steps to an applique. There is a placement stitch. And what that does, you put your background fabric in the hoop and you stitch out the first step of a 3-step applique. And that's what this is. This is step 1. This is the placement stitch. Now, I'm going to have to use this shape 2 more times in IQ Designer. So I'm going to save it by touching, after I hit next, and I don't want to do not want a zigzag stitch for that, so I'm going to return, because you just want to have a straight stitch for this placement stitch. It is going to be covered by fabric and more stitches. So to do that, these 4 icons are your line properties icons, the 4 right here. Touch on the little menu to bring line property screen up. Touch the straight stitch. And since I'm going to change that color, since I'm going to change the stitch, I'm also going to change the color. It doesn't matter what color you pick here, because normally it's all 3 steps will be done with 1 color of thread. So I'm just going to pick up something that contrasts the black. Like a hot pink there is what I picked. Click on OK. And then, so that I can change that entire outline with 1 tap, I'm going to turn on that fill bucket. See how that's highlighted. And then I can take my stylus and I can just touch that line on the screen. And you can, since you change the color, you can visually see the entire thing change to an outline of that reddish hot pink color, which is what I wanted. And changing the color was more for me than for the design. I don't care what color that is, because I'm not going to stitch it out in that color. So there is my placement stitch. Now I'm going to select next, and it shows right here the color and the stitch I have selected for this shape. And now I'm going to save it to my pocket. Okay, I'm going to touch that little icon right there and save it to the machine. And now I'll hit preview. Now when I come back into IQ, I've already got that shape saved in the exact same file size. So here it is showing it, and I'm going to click set and OK. And now this is embroidery edit, and there it is. Dark coral is the color. There's my first shape. So this is our placement stitch. We stitch this out in the hoop, and then we put a piece of fabric over it. And the next thing we're going to create is what's called the tack down stitch. That will tack the fabric down to the fabric on the hoop. And this is how we're going to create that. So next, to create step 2, we're going to click on the Add button. And we're going to go to IQ, right there. And now, before I touch anything, I am going to pull up the design that I just saved. I'm going to, the pocket, where it has the arrow coming out of the pocket, touch that, the machine, and the very first design at the top of your screen is the last one that you saved. Tap that and click Set, and there's that shape that I saved just a moment ago. Now, I want to change the color of it, and but I still want this to be a straight stitch, simply because you want each step to be a different color, because that tells the machine to stop and prompt you to change your thread color when you're actually stitching this out. And why that's important, you want your machine to stop automatically so it gives you a chance to trim fabric in between steps. So what we're going to do here, we're going to go to our Line Properties menu, and I'm going to pick a very contrasting color. I'm just going to put blue this time, and OK, and I want that straight stitch. It defaults to zigzag. You want the straight stitch. Select OK. Now I'm going to select my bucket under Line Properties, and I'm going to touch my design again. It now went from the fuchsia to the blue. I know that's all been changed. Now I'm going to select Next and Preview and OK. And then I'm going to select Set and OK. Now, if you'll notice up here, I have two, a dark coral and an electric blue. It just shows as one design here because they are exactly stacked on top of each other, and that's what you want. So what happens is, I'll explain it to you here. The dark coral is the placement stitch. You put your hooped fabric in the frame, your background fabric, and it's going to stitch this shape down. It's going to stitch out this shape. Then you're going to place your fabric for the applique part itself over that design, and then you're going to tell it, press the Start button, and it will stitch out where it says electric blue. It'll stitch out this exact same shape on top of the previous, and that's what you want. Then you're going to unhoop, take the hoop out, but leave the fabric in the hoop. And with your scissors, you're going to very carefully trim all the fabric up to that line of stitching. And when that's done and you put your hoop back in the machine, then we're going to move to step 3, which we haven't created yet, and that is the actual sew down applique stitch. Okay? So to create step number 3, we're going to click on Add and go to IQ Designer, and we're going to pull that design back out of the pocket, right there, Machine, the first design, and Set. There we are. It's in the shape, the size we want it. Now, we don't want a straight stitch on this one. We want something pretty, okay? So typically, what we're going to do is go into our Line Properties menu. And typically, in applique, a lot of people like to use a satin stitch, and that's that stitch right there. So I'm just going to show you what that one looks like. I am going to change the color of it again. I'm going to pick one of these green colors this time. And click on OK. Select my bucket and tap the design. And it just changed to a really pale green. You know what though? I want us to be able to see it on the screen a little better. I'm going to go to a darker green. There we go. That should show up a little better. There we go. Okay. So if I was happy with the satin stitch, once I select next, I go into a screen where I can adjust the size of that stitch. This first box right here will actually adjust the width of that satin stitch. Okay? This will adjust the density of it. I always leave this at 100% if I'm doing an applique. Now, 0.08. How much? For me, when I do a satin stitch, I prefer to have this in millimeters because my brain just works better for that in millimeters. When we talk hoop sizes, I like to know inches on that one. But anyway, to change this to millimeters, all we have to do is go right up here and touch our settings icon. And it is number 8, page 8 in our settings menu. Right here where it says unit, touch one of these arrows and set it to millimeters and OK. And now look here. This is in millimeters now. It says 2 millimeters. That's its default. And that's a narrower satin stitch. Personally, for me, I prefer either 3 or 4. So I'm going to set this to 4 and hit set and preview and OK. And there it is. If I was happy with that, I would hit set and it would be my third step in my 3-step applique design creation. But if I wanted to try out a different stitch, let's hit the return button and return. And then we'll go back here into the settings menu. And maybe you want candle wicking around that design. That's what icon number 4 here is in line property. And then I'm going to select OK. Yeah, but I want to change the color so I can tell the colors, so that I can tell the stitches have been changed. I'll get a dark orange this time. And then I'm going to touch that with the fill bucket selected. And then I can see it's changed color. That means I've changed the stitch design. I'm going to select next and preview and OK. And there it is in candle wicking. So this is the stitch that'll cover the raw edge of the fabric that's been tacked down. And this will be the most noticeable stitching on the entire design. There's another choice in IQ, one that I really like as well, and that is, excuse me, that is number 5, which is the chain stitch. I love this stitch. It gives a real heirloom look to stuff. It almost looks like you've done some hand embroidery, some hand cross stitching. It's really beautiful. So I'm going to pick yet a different color. See, it's orange, so this darker purple would show up really well against that. And I'm going to select OK. Bucket. It just changed color. That means I changed the the stitch design, and hit next. And now you can see here it still is, it's black and it is at 4 millimeters. That's the width, the length of the chain stitch. And this would be the density of it here. So I'm gonna always left that at 4. You could change this if you wanted to. Let's just put this one up, and it does it 0.1 millimeter at a time. Let's set it up to 5 and hit set and preview. And let's see what that will look like. And there it is. So it gives a really open filigree chain. Looks like a chain going around it. It's really lovely. It's one of my favorite stitches built into IQ Designer on the Altair. So if I was happy with that, I would now hit set and OK. Now we're in embroidery edit, and what we have here, we have 3 steps. This is our positioning stitch, our tack down stitch, and number 3 is our applique stitch. Once we do this one, our applique is finished in the hoop. And that's how easy it is to create an applique in IQ Designer. So let's go up here, and I'm going to change it back to inches. Let's see here. No, page number 8, unit, inch, OK, and there we go. So if I go back to add, let's see here. So, and that's really how that is actually it. Now, another thing to remember is this. So check this out. It's now 5.09 inches by 5.09. Okay? What that means is it will now not fit in a 5x7 hoop. It's too large. So a way to decrease the size of the entire, remember you have 3 separate designs here. Do you see these little shapes right down here? A square, a circle, and a triangle. This is actually a selection. So you can actually select all 3 designs at one time. Check it out. Tap on that. It's entirely covered. It's multiple selection is what it is. Click on OK. Click on your edit screen. Now here I can group all 3 of those if I wanted to, and I'm going to. And what did I do? Let me go back one here. Hold on. There we go. There we go. So if you wanted to resize those, you could just by tapping on that size icon, and I'm going to make it smaller. Down now it says 5 inches by 5 inches. Click on OK, and now it's good to go. Okay. So another thing to remember is this. To select the proper size hoop for it, touch your settings icon, frame size. Let's get that 5x7 in there. 5x7, click on OK. And now it actually shows an outline of your embroiderable area, and you can see that your design fits inside of it. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. And that's all there is to creating a 3-step applique design in IQ Designer.